My name is Sadie Collins, and at 22, I'm a marketing specialist at a boutique advertising agency in Bristol, a vibrant city in the southwest of England. My days revolve around crafting creative campaigns for local brands, brainstorming taglines, and attending virtual meetings from my cozy flat, as long as I hit my deadlines. My job offers the flexibility to work remotely, which suits my independent streak. But life wasn't always this put together. A few years ago, while I was still a student at the University of Bristol, I worked part-time at a charming patisserie called Le Petit Gâteau in Clifton Village. The smell of fresh croissants and espresso filled the air, and it was there behind the counter that I met Ethan Parker. Ethan was 30, a stocky, charming warehouse worker for a logistics firm that shipped goods across the West Country. He had a warm smile and a knack for making customers laugh, which drew me to him. We bonded quickly over shared struggles. My parents, though loving, were always stretched thin, running a small corner shop that barely kept us afloat. Ethan's family, on the other hand, was drowning in debt from his parents' failed property investments during the housing boom. They'd gambled on holiday rentals in Cornwall that never took off, leaving Ethan to fend for himself with student loans piling up. Over late-night shifts, we'd swap stories about our family's financial woes, finding comfort in our shared determination to build better lives. As we grew closer, our conversations shifted from family pressures to dreams of the future. Ethan had an infectious optimism, talking about one day owning a small delivery business. I admired his ambition, even if it seemed far off. After a few months, we started dating, stealing moments between shifts to walk along the Bristol harbourside, sharing fish and chips under the glow of streetlights. Those early days felt like a promise, a partnership built on mutual support. When I graduated with my marketing degree, I'd saved enough from my part-time wages to rent a modest flat in Redland, a leafy suburb with red brick terraces and a quiet charm. Ethan, still grappling with his loans and unable to move out of his parents' cramped council house, was struggling. I couldn't bear to see him stuck, so I offered him a lifeline: move in with me. The flat was small but bright, with a tiny balcony overlooking a shared garden. To make it work, I agreed to cover 80% of the rent, leaving Ethan to handle the remaining 20%. He jumped at the chance, promising to pull his weight. We also split utility bills evenly: gas, electric, and Wi-Fi. Since Bristol's winters demanded a hefty heating budget at first, it felt like an adventure. I come home from the agency, where I was learning the ropes of digital campaigns, and cook us hearty meals, cottage pie or pasta bakes, to save money. Ethan's job was grueling, with long shifts unloading lorries at the warehouse. He'd return exhausted, his boots caked in mud, and I didn't mind taking on most of the housework. I'd scrub dishes, fold laundry, and sweep the hardwood floors, telling myself it was temporary. All I asked was that Ethan take out the bins each evening, a simple task since he was always the last to eat. But more often than not, the bins stayed put, overflowing with takeaway containers and coffee grounds. I'd remind him gently, but his sheepish "I forgot" became a refrain that grated on me. Looking back, those small oversights were the first cracks in our partnership. I didn't realize then how they'd grow, threatening to unravel everything we'd built. If you're still listening, we want to sincerely thank you for spending your time with us. Truly means a lot. We'd love to know, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments and let's see how far this message has reached. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, I highly recommend doing it now so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. These aren't just ordinary stories, they're filled with meaningful life lessons that can inspire, teach, and stay with you long after the video ends. Hit that subscribe button and join our growing community. After graduating with my marketing degree, I'd scrimped and saved enough to rent a small flat in Redland, Bristol, a cozy one-bedroom with creaky floorboards and a view of the communal garden where neighbors sometimes hung their washing. It wasn't much, but it was my first taste of independence, a far cry from my parents' cluttered shop flat in Easton. Ethan, still weighed down by student loans and stuck in his parents' damp council house in Knoll, was in a rough spot. His logistics job paid decently, but most of his wages went to loan repayments, leaving him with little to spare. I hated seeing him so trapped, so I offered to let him move in with me. felt like the natural next step for us, a chance to build something together. The arrangement was practical but lopsided. I agreed to cover 80% of the rent, £800 of the £1,000 monthly bill, since my marketing job at the agency was starting to pay off. Ethan would handle the remaining £200, which he could just about manage. We split the utilities evenly: electricity, gas for the boiler that hummed through Bristol's chilly evenings, and broadband for my remote work. My job was flexible. As long as I delivered campaigns on time, my boss didn't care if I worked from the office in Queen Square or my tiny kitchen table. Ethan's job, however, was relentless. He'd leave at dawn for the warehouse in Avonmouth, spending 12-hour shifts unloading crates of imported goods, coming home with aching muscles and stories of forklift mishaps. His exhaustion was real, so I didn't mind taking on the lion's share of household chores. I became the unofficial keeper of our flat. I cooked hearty dinners. Think shepherd's pie with fluffy mash or spaghetti bolognese spiced with herbs from the local market. I scrubbed dishes, tackled laundry, Ethan's work shirts always smelled faintly of diesel, and dusted the bookshelves where my old uni textbooks sat next to his dog-eared sci-fi novels. I even polished the scuff marks off the skirting boards, a task he never noticed. All I asked in return was one simple thing: take out the bins each night. With Bristol's strict recycling rules, green bins for food waste, black for rubbish, blue bags for plastics, it was a small but essential job, especially since Ethan always ate last, often munching on late-night toast or curry takeaways. But time and again, he forgot. I'd wake to find the kitchen bin overflowing, fruit peels spilling onto the counter, and I'd drag the bags out myself before work, cursing under my breath. One weekend, I was sent to London for a client pitch, a whirlwind of train rides, PowerPoint slides, and overpriced coffee. I returned Sunday evening bone-tired to a flat that looked like it had been hit by a tornado. Dirty plates were piled in the sink, crusted with ketchup and pasta sauce. The bin was a disaster, with takeaway containers and empty crisp packets spilling onto the linoleum. Thin socks and work trousers were strewn across the sofa, and a half-empty pint glass sat on the coffee table, leaving a sticky ring. I was livid but too exhausted to confront him. Instead, I spent hours cleaning, scrubbing the kitchen, sorting the recycling, and folding his clothes, hoping he'd notice the effort. When Ethan strolled in at 9 p.m., he gave me a quick hug, mumbled, "Missed you, babe," and plopped onto the sofa. He flicked on Sky Sports to watch a Premier League match, cracking open a can of Carlsberg. Not a word about the sparkling flat. Not a glance at the freshly scrubbed counters or the neatly stacked dishes. "Missed you?" I thought. You didn't miss me enough to lift a finger. The sting of his indifference hit hard. I stood in the kitchen, gripping the edge of the sink, tears welling up. It wasn't just the mess, it was the realization that I'd been pouring myself into this relationship, sacrificing my time and energy while Ethan coasted. I'd cooked his meals, ironed his shirts, and paid most of the rent, all while juggling my own career. Yet he couldn't manage the one task I'd asked of him. As the football commentary blared, I felt invisible, my efforts reduced to nothing. For the first time, I saw how much I'd been carrying us both, and how little he valued it. That night, as I lay in bed listening to the distant hum of Bristol's nightlife, I knew something had to change. The morning after I returned from my London trip, I woke to the familiar sight of the overflowing kitchen bin, banana peels, crumpled takeaway wrappers, and a half-empty yogurt pot spilling onto the counter. My patience, already worn thin, snapped. I marched into the living room where Ethan was sprawled on the sofa, scrolling through his phone, still in his pajamas. "What do you actually do around here, Ethan?" I demanded, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "Besides work and watching TV, what do you contribute?" He looked up, startled, and mumbled something about being knackered from his warehouse shifts. "You don't get it, do you?" I pressed. "I cook, clean, do your laundry, and pay most of the rent. All I ask is that you take out the bloody bins, and you can't even manage that." Ethan's face hardened. He stood, crossing his arms. "Sadie, I'm exhausted. My job's brutal, 12 hours of hauling crates in that freezing warehouse. I need to unwind." You should understand that." His words stung, but what came next floored me. "My mom did everything for my dad," he said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "That's just how it works." I stared at him, stunned by his outdated logic. Did he really see me as some 1950s housewife, slaving away while he kicked back with a pint? The thought made my blood boil. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I'm done," I said firmly. "I'm not your mom, Ethan. I'm not doing your chores anymore. And from now on, you're paying half the rent, £500, or you can find somewhere else to live." His jaw dropped, and he stammered, trying to argue. "You can't be serious, Sadie. Where's this coming from?" But I was resolute, my voice unwavering. "I'm tired of carrying you. You either step up or get out." For the first time, I felt the power of setting boundaries, and though it scared me, it also felt right. From that moment, I stopped cleaning up after him. I washed only my dishes, laundered only my clothes, and left his mess untouched. Watching Ethan fumble through the flat, searching for a clean shirt or cursing as he tried to iron his work trousers with a cheap iron from Argos, was oddly satisfying. He'd rifle through the laundry basket, muttering, "Where's my blue shirt?" while I sipped my tea, unmoved. He tried to sweet-talk me back to the old routine, flashing that charming smile he used at the patisserie. "Come on, Saad, you're my girlfriend. You're supposed to look after me, yeah?" He'd say, as if I owed him. But I held firm, ignoring his pleas. When the next rent payment came due, I sent £500 to our landlord, Mrs. Patel, a no-nonsense woman who ran a corner shop downstairs. I texted her that Ethan would cover the rest. He stormed in that evening, red-faced. "What the hell, Sadie? You told Mrs. Patel I'd pay half? You know I can't afford that." I shrugged. "You've had it easy for too long. Figure it out." After a tense standoff, he scraped together the money, likely dipping into his savings. He never apologized, though, and that silence spoke louder than his complaints. Our relationship, already fraying, unraveled further. We barely spoke, moving around the flat like strangers. Then came the night that shattered everything. It was a rainy Friday in Bristol, the kind where the wind rattles the windows and the streets smell of wet pavement. I was asleep when Ethan stumbled in at 2 a.m., reeking of cheap lager and cigarette smoke. He shook me awake, slurring, "Sadie, we need to talk. Now." Groggy and annoyed, I sat up, rubbing my eyes. "Can't this wait?" I groaned, but he insisted, swaying slightly as he perched on the edge of the bed in a drunken ramble. He dropped the bomb. He'd fallen for Claire Thompson, a 20-year-old he'd met at his company's Christmas party at a swanky hotel in Clifton. I'd seen Claire there, gliding through the room in a designer dress, her blonde hair catching the chandelier light. She was the daughter of a property magnate who owned half the waterfront developments in Cardiff. "She's a real woman," Ethan slurred, his words cutting like a knife. "Not like you, always banging on about your career." He rambled on about Claire's elegance, her wealth, how she didn't flaunt her job like I did. I should have been gutted, but instead I felt numb. Our relationship had been dying for months, and I'd already mourned it. I kept my voice steady. "I don't care, Ethan. If you're so in love with her, we're done. Move out as soon as you can." His eyes widened, as if he'd expected me to beg him to stay. "What, you're not jealous?" he scoffed, his ego bruised. "Not even a little?" I smiled faintly. "I'm happy for you. Really. Just leave." He turned red, muttering about how my recent promotion to junior campaign manager must have gone to my head. I let him rant, too tired to argue. The truth was, I hadn't loved him in a long time. We'd become roommates, not partners, and his betrayal only confirmed what I already knew. Ethan started packing the next day, his belongings disappearing into cardboard boxes. On his final night, I came home from a late client meeting to find him and Claire on my sofa, her designer handbag tossed carelessly on the coffee table. My stomach churned at his audacity, bringing her here without a word. I forced a polite smile, greeting Claire, but she barely looked up, her eyes scanning me with a cold, dismissive smirk. "Hi," she said curtly, then turned back to Ethan, whispering something that made him chuckle. I bit my tongue, not wanting to stoop to her level, and retreated to the kitchen to make myself dinner. A simple pasta with pesto, the kind I'd perfected during uni. I stirred the pot. Claire sauntered in for a glass of water, leaning against the counter and staring at me like I was an exhibit at the Bristol Museum. "Need something?" I asked, trying to keep my tone neutral. She gave me that same haughty look, said nothing, and walked out. I shook it off, focusing on my meal, but later, as I carried my plate upstairs, I overheard them talking in the living room. Claire's voice was sharp, mocking. "How could you date someone like her, Ethan? She's so plain." My heart sank, but what Ethan said next was worse. "Oh, Sadie." "She was an easy mark," he laughed. "Paid for our dates, covered most of the rent, even let me cash back in uni, saved me a fortune." Claire giggled, asking why he'd ever bothered with me. "She was gullible," he said coldly. "Made life easy." I froze on the stairs, my plate trembling in my hands. I'd suspected he'd taken advantage of me, but hearing him admit it, laughing about it, felt like a punch to the gut. Humiliation and betrayal washed over me, hot and heavy. I wanted to storm down and scream, to throw his words back in his face, but I couldn't let them see me break. Instead, I crept to my room, locked the door, and sank onto the bed. Tears came, silent and burning, soaking my pillow as the Bristol rain pattered against the window. I cried for the years I'd wasted, for the love I'd thought was real. But as the night wore on, my tears turned to resolve. I wouldn't let Ethan or Claire see me weak. I'd show them I was stronger than they could ever imagine. With Ethan gone, the flat in Redland felt like mine again. I reclaimed every corner, hanging fairy lights on the balcony and filling the bookshelves with novels I'd never had time to read. I come home from the agency, kick off my boots, and cook for one, simple dishes like roasted vegetable tarts or creamy mushroom risotto, paired with a glass of cheap Sauvignon Blanc from the co-op. My evenings were mine to savor, whether binge-watching Line of Duty or sketching ideas for new campaigns. For the first time in years, I felt light, unburdened by Ethan's mess or his expectations. Bristol's spring bloomed outside my window, with daffodils lining the streets and buskers playing acoustic covers by the harbourside. I was free, and I loved it. 2 months later, during a coffee break at work, my colleague Jess dropped a bombshell. "You won't believe this," she said, scrolling through her phone at a cafe in St. Nicholas Market. "Ethan's getting married to that Claire girl." I nearly choked on my flat white. Jess showed me their engagement photos on Instagram. Ethan in a tailored suit, Claire in a silk dress, posing in front of a Cotswolds manor. They looked polished, happy, untouchable. A pang of something, regret maybe, flickered, but I brushed it off. Ethan wasn't my problem anymore. That evening, I found an envelope in my letterbox, wedged between bills and a flyer for a local curry house. My heart stopped when I saw the cream cardstock, embossed with gold lettering. "Ethan Parker and Claire Thompson request your presence." Inside, scrawled in Ethan's messy handwriting, was a note. "Come see the grand life I'm about to have with Claire." The audacity hit me like a slap. After years of using me, paying for his rent, his dates, his life, he had the nerve to rub his new wealth in my face? My blood boiled. I paced the flat, the Bristol rain drumming against the windows, and decided I wouldn't let him have the last word. This called for revenge, not vicious, but sharp enough to sting. I poured myself another glass of wine and opened my laptop, diving into Claire's social media. Her profiles were a curated showcase of privilege. Photos from ski trips in Chamonix, yacht parties in Monaco, and designer bags stacked like trophies. But buried in her older posts, I found traces of her ex, Ryan Mitchell, a software engineer who'd been with her since their school days at a posh academy in Cheltenham. Their breakup was recent, only 6 months ago, and messy, judging by the deleted couple photos. I sent Ryan a friend request on LinkedIn, then a message laying out my plan with brutal honesty. I was Ethan's ex, invited to his wedding to gloat, and I wanted Ryan as my plus one to turn the tables. To my surprise, he replied within hours. Over a video call, Ryan's warm Bristol accent put me at ease. He was candid about Claire's infidelity, multiple affairs, the latest with Ethan while they were still together. "She always had a thing for older blokes," he said, a bitter edge to his voice. When she left me for him, it wasn't a shock. I shared my own story, the years of paying Ethan's way, his betrayal, his cruel words. Ryan listened, his jaw tightening. "He's a user," he said finally. "I'll come with you." Not to cause a scene, but to face her. We agreed. This was about closure, not chaos. The wedding was held at a sprawling estate in the Somerset countryside, all manicured lawns and ivy-covered stone. I wore a sleek navy dress, my hair swept into a loose bun, feeling a mix of nerves and defiance. Ryan, in a sharp blazer, looked calm but resolute. As we walked into the venue, Ethan's eyes locked onto us from across the marquee. His face drained of color, and he hurried over, pulling me aside near a table laden with canapes. "What the hell are you playing at, bringing him?" he hissed, glancing at Ryan. I smiled sweetly. "You invited me to see your grand life, Ethan. I brought a friend." "Problem?" He couldn't make a scene, not with guests sipping Prosecco nearby, and stormed off, glaring. The ceremony began, and Claire glided down the aisle in a dazzling lace gown, her father, a stern man in a morning suit, at her side. She hadn't noticed Ryan yet, her focus on the officiant and Ethan's nervous grin. The vows were standard, the string quartet playing softly, but I could feel the tension building. The reception, held in a grand marquee with chandeliers and floral centerpieces, Claire finally saw us. Her champagne flute froze midair, her eyes darting from me to Ryan. She marched over, her heels clicking on the polished floor. "What are you doing here with her?" she demanded, her voice sharp enough to turn heads. "Are you two dating now?" Ryan stayed cool. "Sadie's my plus one. Can we talk privately?" Claire's face reddened, but she nodded, throwing me a venomous look as they stepped outside. I sipped my drink, watching Ethan across the room. He was trying to play the charming groom, but his eyes kept flicking toward the exit. Party carried on, guests danced to a cover band playing Ed Sheeran, but Claire didn't return. An hour later, a flustered bridesmaid in a pastel dress rushed in, clutching a piece of paper. The music stopped, and she addressed the crowd, her voice trembling. "Claire's gone," she said. "She left this." The note, written in Claire's elegant script, said she'd realized she still loved Ryan and couldn't go through with the marriage. She'd left with him right then from her own wedding. Gasps rippled through the marquee. Ethan stood frozen, his face a mask of humiliation as Claire's parents, mortified, ushered guests toward the exits, apologizing profusely. I was as shocked as anyone. My plan had been to rattle Ethan, to let him see I wasn't the gullible girl he'd mocked. I hadn't expected Claire to bolt. As the crowd dispersed, I caught Ethan's eye. He looked broken, his grand life crumbling before it began. I didn't feel triumph, just a strange mix of guilt and relief. I'd wanted to teach him a lesson, not destroy his wedding. But as I left the estate, the Somerset stars bright overhead, I knew one thing. Ethan's attempt to humiliate me had backfired spectacularly. The days after the wedding were a storm I hadn't anticipated. Ethan blew up my phone with texts and voicemails, each one angrier than the last, blaming me for his ruined life. "You planned this, Sadie," one message read. "You brought Ryan to destroy me." I ignored him, deleting each notification, but he didn't stop. One Saturday morning, as Bristol streets buzzed with market shoppers, I heard a pounding on my flat's door. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan, disheveled in a creased hoodie, his face twisted with rage. I cracked the door open, keeping the chain on. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice steady despite my racing heart. He launched into a tirade, shouting that I'd wrecked his future. He confessed he'd quit his warehouse job. Certain Claire's wealth would set him up for life, maybe a fancy house in Clifton or a Range Rover. "You brought her ex on purpose," he yelled. I took a deep breath, my resolve hardening. "I heard you that night, Ethan," I said coldly. "You and Claire laughing about how you used me, my money, my time, my love. You admitted I was gullible for paying your rent, your dates, everything." His eyes widened, caught off guard. "I didn't make Claire leave you," I continued. "She's a grown woman who made her choice. Stop blaming me for your mess." He tried to argue, but when he wouldn't leave, I pulled out my phone. "I'm calling the police," I warned. His bravado faltered, and he backed off, muttering curses as he disappeared down the street. That day, I blocked his number, installed a Ring doorbell camera, and changed the locks on my Redland flat. Ethan was out of my life for good. A month later, I got a message from Ryan, inviting me to lunch at a cozy cafe by the Bristol Harbourside. I arrived expecting a quick catch-up, but Claire was there too, sitting beside him, her designer sunglasses perched on her head. My guard went up, but she surprised me with a warm smile. Over cappuccinos and avocado toast, she apologized for her behavior. "I was awful to you," she admitted, her voice soft. "Ethan fed me lies about you, made me think I was better than you. I was insecure, jealous of how independent you are." She confessed that seeing Ryan at the wedding rekindled old feelings. "I never stopped loving him," she said, glancing at Ryan, who nodded. They'd reconciled that day, running off together after a heartfelt talk. They were now happy, planning a future, and Claire was filing for an annulment with Ethan. I listened, sipped my coffee, and forgave her, not for her sake, but for mine. I didn't want their drama in my life, so I wished them well and left it at that. Reflecting on it all, I feel a twinge of guilt for how things spiraled at the wedding. My goal was to give Ethan a taste of his own medicine, not to derail his life. But I can't deny the satisfaction of watching his arrogance crumble. Now I'm focused on my career, crafting campaigns that light up Bristol's billboards and savoring my freedom in my little flat. I dance to Taylor Swift in my kitchen, plan solo trips to places like Bath or Paris, and never again will I let someone like Ethan drag me down. I hope he learns from this. Chasing money over love is a hollow game. Here are 5 lessons I've taken from this roller coaster, and I hope they resonate with you. Set boundaries early. Don't let anyone take your kindness for granted. I wish I'd spoken up sooner about Ethan's laziness. Value yourself first. I poured too much into someone who didn't reciprocate. Your worth isn't tied to what you do for others. Trust your instincts. Deep down, I knew Ethan was using me, but I ignored the red flags. Listen to that inner voice. Revenge isn't always sweet. My plan worked, but the fallout was messier than I expected. Healing yourself is more powerful than settling scores. Embrace your independence. Living for myself taught me I don't need anyone to complete me, just to complement me. If my story hit home, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your mates, and hit that subscribe button for more real-life tales. Your support keeps me sharing. Let's keep the conversation going. What's a lesson you've learned from a tough breakup? Drop it in the comments below.